I'm Peter Paterno. I'm a partner at King Holmes Paterno and Berliner, and we're here in my office. Music lawyer, depending on the level, music lawyer, primarily a music lawyer that negotiates contracts for recording artists. That's the sort of bulk of the work. On some level, also is involved with the artists if the artists are also writers. In other words, they weren't on American Idol. They also negotiate their music publishing contracts. And there's a lot that stems off of that. That's the primary focus of what you do as a music lawyer. My background, before I was a music lawyer, was in general practice. And so I'm sort of able to handle some of the other problems, or at least know where to turn on some of the other problems that artists may have. Typical artist problems like drug busts and drunk driving and things like that. But they buy houses, they have divorces, and they look to you, artists look to you as their primary legal source on all those kind of issues, even though you may know very little about it, or in the case of most music lawyers, nothing about it. Which, by the way, is not a good thing. I mean, music lawyers should learn about those kinds of things, but most of them don't. Our firm, and again, all music lawyers are different. I started out in a big full-service law firm. I started out at Manat Phelps, which is I don't know how many hundreds of lawyers now, and I think pretty much covers every area. My firm now is much smaller, but we actually have a corporate and real estate practice and litigation practice. So we're pretty much full service for an artist, other than criminal matters. Criminal matters that get serious. I mean, I can go fake a drunk driving arraignment. But so serious criminal matters or tax stuff, we bring in outside tax counsel and family law when they finally do get that divorce. We try not to handle. I get stuck and sucked into those things too. I was a general practitioner for just a year and a half. Then I went to work at Manat Phelps as a music lawyer, and I did that for 10 years and or longer. And Michael Eisner decided he wanted to start a record company, and he called me up, and I talked to him, and at some point he decided he wanted me to start the record company, and so that's what I did. I'd always wanted to. I really actually did want to be more involved in the music business and the record business than just being a lawyer. So it was actually a pretty easy decision for me to make. Like I said, I started out. I played in bands. I was terrible. Then I went to college. Then I went to grad school, and then I went and I wrote software. And I used to write software for the space shuttle. And remember, it blew up. I think that was my software. No, I'm just joking about that. It was many years after I left. It was somebody else's software. But that was my training. I was a math major. I did math. And one thing you learn when you're in math is that a guy that's great in math is so on another planet from anybody else. I mean, the math geniuses, like, they really are different. And I realized that I might be good in math, but I would never be that. So I had to go find some place where the people weren't quite as smart, and I found law school. So I went off to law school, and I did that for a while, and then I got out and didn't know what I wanted to do. So I started a firm where I think I talked about this before. I just did general practice for like a year and a half, dog bite cases. And what kind of got me off that is I had done a divorce for some woman, and she called up at 4 in the morning and said, my husband here, he's got a gun and he wants the couch. Didn't I get the furniture in the divorce? And I go, what? He's got a gun? Give him the goddamn couch. So I figured, well, that's enough of this. So I heard there was an opening. Actually, it's very funny. This is my current partner, Howard King, was doing music law at Manat Phelps, and he hated the person he was working for, and calls me up and says, if you know anybody that wants a job doing music law, I'm about to quit. So I applied for the job at Manat Phelps, and they ultimately hired me, and so that's how I started doing music law. So I did that for like 12 years, and then got the job running Hollywood Records at Disney, and that was a colossal failure. And at the end of 4 years, they fired. Well, they didn't fire me. My contract technically ended, but I prefer to think of it as I was fired. And then then I moved back into private practice. Well, I spent a year trying to get a real job because being a lawyer is just not all that much fun. And I was going, God, I can't do that again. And then after about a year where I couldn't get anybody to hire me because I was basically persona non grata in any business, I had to slink back to practicing law again. And so that's what I've now done since then. And it still isn't all that much fun. The way I met Metallica was early on in their career. They were on a label called Megaforce, and they were managed by the guy that ran Megaforce and published by the guy that ran Megaforce. And Cliff Bernstein, their current manager, called me up and said, "You should check this band out. These guys are really amazing." And he had Lars Ulrich give me a call, and I met with them. And I still remember the first time I saw them play. This was like 1982 or 3. I had no idea who they were, and the music was a little bit, I'd have to say, foreign to what I was listening to at the time. Just didn't really sound much like the Eagles or Jackson Browne. So I went and saw them play a show at the Palace, and I mean, I could listen to the music and I went, this is really good, but I just don't get it. And but I could tell it was good, but it was just it wasn't what I was really used to. And I went and saw them play the Palace, and I remember walking out of that thing and just turning to nobody in particular saying, James Hetfield is Jesus Christ. I mean, he was that amazing. It was that, didn't know the songs, didn't know them. It was just amazing. So anyway, so it was from Cliff that I met with Metallica. And then, I looked at their situation, which it wasn't the most favorable. A bad record deal on an independent label with not owning their own publishing or their management. And my first job was to get them out of that, and that's what I did. And then they went on and hired Cliff and Peter Mensch, and we've been together for a really long time. In terms of shopping, it's something you do a lot more when you're younger and trying to establish a clientele. It was a lot different also back when I started out. Actually, A&R people had the ability to sign artists, which they don't much have anymore. There were many more signings going on, and there was much more of an active, A&R community. The A&R function, I've sort of noticed as I've kind of observed it, is more directed, realistically, at white rock bands. And these sort of like critics all sit around and talk about them. The A&R function, the A&R people are not so much like in hip hop or R&B. Those tend to come in from other places, not from lawyers shopping them. So as hip hop becomes more prevalent, the shopping becomes less. As rock becomes less prevalent, the shopping becomes less. As people get signed less, shopping becomes less. And as you get older, like me, you just can't put up with it anymore. You can't put up with sending out 10 CDs and nobody responding, and the artist calling you up and saying what's going on, and the guy hasn't listened to it. It's a very frustrating process, and ultimately not all that fruitful. And in fact, when I used to do a lot of shopping, I sort of had two careers. I was a lawyer from like 1980 to 1990, and then I went to run a record company, and then in the mid-90s I came back and became a lawyer again. And in my first career I did a lot of shopping, again, it was more productive then, but even then it wasn't so much more productive. You learned as time went on that bands or artists didn't get signed based on some lawyer sending it around or some manager sending it around. It really was pretty much other things. It just, the lawyer could fan the flames once they started. But it was really the artist doing the bulk of the work to get noticed and write great songs and get a presence out there and have people notice who they are. So, I just decided it was just such an inefficient process and not all that much, not really very rewarding, that I kind of just stopped doing it. And, but on the other hand, I have the luxury of representing a lot of major artists, so, if I don't shop the latest new band, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference in my life. But not to say we don't take on new artists, because we do. If I had my preference, it would be when they had their first offer. Which, by the way, is mostly how bands do get signed. Again, when I say bands, it's kind of referring to white rock bands. But that would be my preference. They probably would like to be earlier, so they have somebody they can call up and bother and talk about the industry about. But Well, again, if a band's got an offer, I'm a lot more interested. If they got really good management, I'm a lot more interested. Management is also very helpful in the shopping process. And I guess when you say shopping, if you include that broadly to mean like going out and playing, cutting demos, putting out your own independent records, if that's all part of the shopping process, then I guess it's more productive than to just the idea of me as a lawyer getting a demo and calling up an A&R guy and sending it to him. And, you know, so again, I have the luxury at this point in my career of not having to listen to 300 demos and decide which ones are good, which lawyers are notoriously bad at anyway. I think part of my early success